And the first question I have is, what are some of the best practices that businesses are using with success that you would like to bring up during your panel? And I'd like to start with Cyrus. You mentioned something about intelligence that can be gathered for product and messaging strategies. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So on social, the most authentic sentiment and sort of messaging and thought around your product is had on social, right? That conversation happens with consumers that are enjoying your product, that have a natural affinity for your product in one way or another. And they don't really have an agenda with you. They're just talking about it with their friends and their life experiences. Tapping into those moments and those experiences and understanding what experiences inspire people to post on social in the first place, there's no more sort of direct source of how to influence your product strategy. If I'm Campbell's Soup and people are using a lot of hot sauce or they're drinking Diet Cokes or however they're consuming my product, I want to know organically, not in a way that's contrived or trying to reach out to the brand. And in my experience working with a lot of our clients, the product roadmap does get effectuated quite dramatically by what happens from their customers on social, right? I mean, 20 years ago we had this, what's the product feedback from the product to the product manager to the salesperson. There's a number of steps before it gets to the product's hands. Now there's all the middlemen are gone. We can get right to the source very directly and make a pretty heavy impact.
Okay. Amisha, you said that SAP uses quite a number of tools. And what kind of tools are you using and what are some best practices?
Sure. So when you're looking in a marketplace, and we cover many different types of software and all different kinds of industries, so we really need to be cognizant of what's happening and what are the latest market trends that we can tap into. So we have a global, social media team that run all of our social media channels, and so they're using things like Sprinkler, tools like Sprinkler to listen and see what the market trends are, who's saying what, are executives being picked up and things like that, so we can run reports and see some market trends that way. There are things that I use, influencer marketing. I use a tool called Tracker, where it tells me what my influencers that are in my influencer program, what they're saying, what the trends are with them, and that can help inform some of our marketing content. We look at things like there's something called Social Mention, and it's a good visual representation of what's going out there in the market, and it can tell you your brand's, the strength of your brand. It can tell you the sentiment that's going out there, you versus competitors, and it's a free tool. There's another free tool called Mention. It's kind of takes place of Google Alerts, but it's a little bit more meaty. So that's another good one that you can just put on your computer. Those two are free. There's another tool called Onletica, and that is really getting more into the analyst space and gives you lots of reports based on what's happening in the market, who's saying what, and you can get down even by region or by country, and so you can get a good global level if you'd like as well, and you can figure out what the market trends are, what the hot topics are, by country, by region, and things like that. So that's really helpful, because then you can look at data different ways, and you can figure out, in India, this is a trend right now happening in IoT, but in Germany, here it is, and in the US, this is what this is. So when you're working with your sales teams or when you're providing that information or marketing content, you can tailor it around what's happening in real time or what's relevant today.
And Serena, I know you feel pretty strongly about what you want people to do when they listen.
Yeah, so one of the tools that we work with is Nuvi, N-U-V-I, which does a lot of influencer identification. One of the reasons I like it is it tends to be pretty comprehensive. It has Facebook data, but it's a lower price point. And then I wanted to quickly also just mention, because we've done a couple of new things. This has nothing to do with me. Just so everybody knows, Reddit has a tool where you can go to reddit.com/domain/put in your web address. So businesswire.com. And it will tell you how many articles from your website or from your blog, from that domain, have been submitted into Reddit. So it's just literally, they told me this last week, so I wanted to share it because it's a really good way to listen to see where your information is being seeded into Reddit.
Can you just say that one more time?
Yeah.
Slower.
So it's reddit.com/domain/businesswire.com. So whatever your URL is. Because what we found listening, so when it comes to what you want to listen for in social, is obviously a lot of trending. One of the reasons why I brought this Reddit up and sort of changed on you right then and there is that Reddit obviously is one place where you're going to find unvarnished conversations about your product, because people are very mean very blunt. And then I've also found recently that when looking for trend information, sort of emerging trends. So I think that there's tons of social platforms out there, and there are really a lot of listening tools. So you have to find what your goal, you have to know your goal, then you pick your product and you use that tool. And then there are other things you can do. So for example, one of the things I do is legitimately identifying an emerging trend by using Google Suggest. Taking a clean browser, opening up a clean browser, not incognito, but I mean a browser you've never clicked on and haven't used in the last year, typing in your company name, not your URL, and then the letter A. Delete that, letter B, letter C, and it's actually going to show you what people are Google searching for you right now in Google. So if you have a crisis that might be coming up, if you have a product launch and you want to sort of see if the product launch has taken hold on search, other than utilizing Google Analytics and your inbound traffic, Google Suggest has these products. And what I've realized is by doing that on a weekly basis, first off, I have amazing blog content because I'm always ahead of what people are asking for because it's right here. And secondly, I'm able to do a lot of reputation management, and then also same thing with my competitors. So what I mean is that'll show you literally today who's searching for it. I don't have to wait for Google Trends to tell me. I don't have to wait for 7 days of analytics. I can find out. So what I look for is I look for obviously anything that's impacting my company or my industry. I search for misspellings of our company name. I monitor for the C-suite and all of the people in my company and all the misspellings of their names. But I've started to look for industry trends utilizing some of these freer tools.
I have another question for the audience. Who works for a large enterprise? If you don't mind raising your hand. Who works for a smaller company? Who are the unemployed people? I'm asking because obviously it makes a huge difference in social listening if you're a large company, small company in terms of what you can invest. And we'll talk about tools a little bit more later, but there are free tools, and then there are the tools where you spend $5,000 a month, where you also need staff to actually become experts and run this. I wanted to just mention one tool that anybody can use, Google Alerts. If you go to google.com/alerts, you can put in your name, your customer's name, your product, and every day Google will send you this lovely newsletter. I do this for all of my clients, and you'll see what's top in Google and have also good content curated for your social channels. Moving on, where do we think the future is going? And I'm going to first ask Amisha. She said she thinks it's good to make a plan based on trends versus just company objectives. So I want to hear more about that.
So a lot of times, we all have written a lot of marketing content. Certainly at a big company like SAP, we produce a lot of marketing content. But a lot of it is, me too, or, we're really good at this product, or we have a really great case study, but it's very, self-centered and it's self-serving, which it should be, because that's what, we're trying to get sales. But if you take a look at, if you can find trends and hot topics that are relevant to your buying audience, and we use influencer marketing, but even if you're not doing influencer marketing, you can look at those trends and see what those experts are talking about, and think of ways of how you can contribute and be a part of that conversation. And I think, whether you use free tools or paid tools for social media listening, finding out what the trends are, what the relevant conversations are that are interesting to people, and being a part of those conversations can be a really important strategy for your company to then be perceived as a thought leader in that space or in that market. And I think that's a really important thing to do based on what is almost an outside-in approach. And I think that's really important.
And Cyrus, you were saying something about customer experience and intimacy. Do you want to elaborate on that for the future of the space?
Yeah, I think, I think ad tech in general, just advertising, in whatever form online, has historically and currently and for the near future been very, it's still generic. It's not intimate, and everyone tries to get there. There's a million tools and softwares trying to solve that problem, but we're not there yet. And I think social is the closest that we've gotten in forever, and it's only going to get better. There's right now with social, there's video, and video is such a prominent component that's going to be growing, and tapping into that medium as well is going to be important for YouTube and all these different channels. But I think currently, we're able to get handles of people that love your business. Now, whether you're big or small, whether how many you get budget or don't, you can get that information, and in varying degrees. And I think the future, with regards to being more intimate, is tying that information to cookies, and really starting to follow. I mean, right now we're not able to have the right message to the right person at the right time. It's very difficult, especially on social. I think we're going to get there, and the future is that. And imagine getting your message exactly curated to that buyer at the time that they need to hear it. I don't think there'll ever be anything more powerful than that, right? So that's where the future, I think, is going to go, and that's intimacy in a way that even Facebook marketing and Twitter marketing today still is not all the way there.
So excited for that. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's really coming. I'm 6'2", so if I could get a message about tall, long pants, I would buy all the pants.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately, I'm waiting, but I could not be more blunt or vocal or public about my data on that. And I still don't like big pants.
Sure.
Sorry.
So you're not allowed to switch on me this time.
That's tough.
You said the customer journey
Yeah.
needs to become more granular.
Yeah, so it's actually, it very much ties into this. So it's very funny, because if you ask any company, you're like, let's create our social, let's create our listening program, let's create this. We generally know how people come to our business and then how to get them to buy, right? We have the generals of that, but we gotta get much more granular. And it's very funny that marketing, we just don't have the tools yet, and it's coming. But right now, we're writing one message for everybody. Think about it, one tweet. Every time you tweet, you're tweeting to your entire audience. But Facebook, for example, has messaging tools, audience optimization tools, where literally you could hit your own fan page with highly customized messaging. Nobody is doing that. Anybody in here using the free audience, you're not paid advertising, but internal? 2 people. It's because of the amount of time it takes. It's not that this is like we're bad marketers. We simply don't have the time. And that's the difference. That's where I see the future going, is that instead of having to take the time to use the audience optimization, 14 different messages to 14 different audiences, that can take you 2 hours, 3 hours to schedule. I'm waiting for advertising to come in. So where you'll be able to get all of these more granular points, and then you can modify your messaging so it's more customized for the end user. So that's where I think listening is going, right? Listening, right now we're listening and we're getting these themes, and I know that Business Wire's audience changes by demographic and what people need from us, but I don't have the technology yet to serve that content back out in a granular manner. So I think what it is really understanding your customer journey. Stop looking at it from the big picture of like, someone wants to write a news release, right? My customer journey. They're writing the release, they send it to us, we send it out, they're doing their own pigeonhole, but getting it down to such micro-targeted levels that when somebody talks to me, I'm not giving them a vague answer like I am to you guys right now, but I'm giving a highly customized response back. And that is absolutely the future. And it's going to start with listening, because you're going to have to get data from customers, and they have to feel comfortable giving you that data, but it's also going to go into the ad tech tools, which are not there yet, but they're coming in. So it'll be a version of listening, crafting it, and using technology to modify your messaging as it goes down.
And I just want to add to everything you said, which sounds great. I don't think we know exactly what the future looks like, because if you look at Google, right, we're also dependent on Google search. That's the #1 engine we're all as marketers nowadays tied to. But Google is saying their future algorithms for search will be based around artificial intelligence. I mean, that's what they really want. And what does that mean for all of us, in terms of how we write our blogs and how we market? I don't have the answer. Hopefully it means that we can do all of those things, but you never know. It seems like a lot of the time when companies come up with cool things like that, we suddenly have to pay for more things. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be good or bad. We just don't know. But one thing's for sure, right? It changes all the time. So we got to keep listening. Pun intended.
Because specifically on this topic, you were talking about personalization and being able to target specific people, the challenges of the walled gardens. So you can understand that this person is doing that on Facebook, but you cannot connect it to a Twitter, to an Instagram, yes.
Or to all their dark sharing, right? That's one thing we haven't talked about, is the fact that there's so much information, so much more information. Like what I'll post on Facebook is nothing compared to what I'm texting my friends. As far as, have you seen this link? Did you see? Rivaling the...
Can you describe to everybody a few forms of dark media so that we know?
Yeah, text messaging, email marketing, Facebook Messenger. These are all products where you might see something on Facebook that offends you. Somebody sent an article and you're like, oh my God. So you might grab that article through Facebook, send it to 10 friends and be like, we need to clean this up, and everybody goes, but that's sharing, that's private sharing, it's not done publicly. And there's issues with privacy. We all know in this room, right, that there's no such thing as privacy. But outside this room, there's still a perception of privacy. And then, you know, like it's a lot of the vision, that's exactly goes into what GumGum does, is this concept of identifying non-verbal mentions of your company, non-textual mentions of your company, and identifying that. Right now, if Business Wire appears in here's a great story, Warren Buffett owns Business Wire. So CNN had a big article about Warren Buffett. What photo do they use? Our sales meeting with our logo behind it. So I happen to have been watching CNN and caught that, but I would have never known that we'd had this massive mention of our company through Warren Buffett on social. Or, you know what I mean? I would have never known that, and that's another version of dark social, which is visual identifications of your brand. And we're still not seeing any of that. So right now, a lot of the data that we have, until you get into bigger tools, which is exactly what you're talking about, still aren't showing you the exact data. They'll show you what people are tweeting that they're going to do, but it doesn't really tie into what they're doing on a daily basis. Hey, you guys take that.
Actually, just one comment. Oh, go ahead, please.
So we tag all our photos on our Twitter so we can see where that tag ends up proliferating, but there's no way to like really find.
Which is a great thing, by the way. Tag yourself in your own photos when you tweet them out, so you can track it.
And as far as the dark media goes, I mean, Snapchat and Facebook sort of fall into that as well, right? I mean, there's no, Snapchat last summer reverted its privacy policy to disallow anyone to access user level information. That's on purpose. Instagram's different, sort of church and state with those two companies. But, you know, one anecdote is we tracked Ben & Jerry's over the last few months, and when they came out publicly for Black Lives Matter, the sentiment around the brand blew the roof out, as you can imagine. But none of it had to do about ice cream. It was about and they're a very democratic sort of leaning brand in general, but their followers were up in arms, either good or bad, like supportive and saying, you know, thanks for standing up for it. And the other half was like, what the hell are you doing? And none of it has hashtagging Ben & Jerry's. And Ben & Jerry's, so when they found that out, which was not at the moment, it was like later on because they can't find this stuff, they just let it go. And once they found it out, they're like, all right, we have to back down a little bit. As much as we want to be, so you should see the earned media pop is really funny because they were like very vocal and it was going crazy. And then when they saw the sentiment was becoming now more negative, they're like, all right, we have to back down. So it just sort of dwindled down. But it was like 3 days after the fact.
And these are things that didn't show up in a standard search,
Nope.
right? These were all things you had to identify,
Yeah.
and that's the future of analytics. And so if you're looking to buy a new analytics program, these are the types of things you should be asking.
Yeah.
Do you have, also, if you hire an
In real
analytics
time.
program, Facebook, making sure that they have access to Facebook data. Facebook only gives its data to certain people, so you have to ask the questions to
Yeah.
get it.
Data sift, that's the only way you can get data from Facebook now.
And their partners.
And their partners.
One of the things that's interesting, monitoring services on Facebook, they don't actually show you the comments on your ads. So you have to ask for them. So people will do ads on Facebook and think they've got no engagement and then trip over their own ad later and find out that there were 30 posts on that ad and you never get alerted to it. If you do ads on Facebook, it doesn't tell you that people commented on your ads. That's dark social right then and there is happening, that people very rarely click on their own ads to see, oh my God, people hate this. Like, oh, I gotta pull this ad down. Like, I'm pushing this out like it's nobody's business, and the comments are terrible.
And I think that's also something to keep in mind, that all these analytics tools, especially the more sophisticated they get, they require trained people to operate them. Because it's really easy to also draw wrong conclusions from data.
Yeah.
I wanted to make one more comment to what you said, and it's a little bit sidetracking, but obviously as marketers, the holy grail for all of us is intention, right? Knowing the intention of the people we want to sell to. And currently, predictive marketing seems to be the best we have, but there are actually movements, I just wanted to throw this out, of companies that are startups that's been around for years now, where people actually can own their own data. And you will say, well, how do I own my own data? It's out there on the internet. But so say you're SAP, not that you do this, but maybe you buy lists of people, right? And people go all over the internet to put this information about you together. And if you've ever looked at these reports, you're like, oh yeah, this is true about me, this isn't true. So that's a really big margin of error. So these companies, they say, you have your data, you decide how much data you want to share, and then companies can pay you to either share your data, or you can say you are willing to share intentions with companies. So for example, oh, you're willing to share with a company that you're looking to buy a new car, and then they can target and send you offers. there's a company called Miko in Australia, for example, they do that, and there's a bunch of other ones. So it's a really interesting space. It also has to do with data privacy, because people want to have more data privacy, but that is often forgotten, that there's this whole parallel universe. But coming back to the topic, and first of all, were there questions or comments?
Do you know that this last year was the first year a tool launched that could tell PR people the impact of their news on their stock price? 2016, the very first, it's called the Market Impact Report. It's the very first time that you can now actually track news sentiment and news reach with actual stock price marketing. And it's 2016.
What is it called?
Market Impact Report.
But maybe it's a little bit semantics, because if you talk to me about data analytics or data-driven marketing, for me that's all big data. I'll throw that together. So you're saying focus more on one aspect in there than the other?
Focus more in data analytics, programming to analyze the data, not the analytical tools, because sometimes the analytical tools like Sprinkler, Brainwatch, they don't offer the accurate data on dimensions.
Yes.
That's right. It's like SpyFu, for example. I love SpyFu. It's a great tool. But if you dig deeper on those tools, there was a discussion on Quora where somebody who sounded very knowledgeable said that it actually is a lot of averages that come up about the keywords of competitors and links you get. If you want the real numbers, a lot of those tools, I mean, that's just the best they can do.
Many times I came across the sentiment breakdown in Brainwatch. It was not accurate. I have to do manually. So
Good
with
point.
Sprinkler as well,
So,
when
I
I
think
use to
Sirius
analyze companies
knows a lot about this
at
too.
Wells Fargo, we
Right.
have the accurate.
so
Thank you.
interesting point, and a couple of things. So there's a lot of tools, and social listening has a lot of sort of different meanings to different people and different tools. I think Sprinkler, big, massive company, Brandwatch, even Gum, we're all sort of in this. I'm not saying we do the same thing, but we have the same sort of functionality built into it, right? It's a question of what are you after, and companies like us, or even Sprinkler or Brandwatch, it's not an accuracy thing. I mean, we're all pulling from the same feed, right? For Twitter's got a fire hose, so there's no inaccuracy. We're pulling in the data from them. Instagram doesn't have a fire hose, but they have their way of providing you the content that they won't tell anyone how much you're getting, but you get a certain allotment. Now, from there, the inaccuracies could come in, depending on how you're looking at it, or what you're asking, or all those different things. You can get a direct API into Sprinkler or us or anyone else into your own data shop, and then you can do whatever you want with it. And so I think it's just a matter of understanding very clearly, to Serena's point earlier on, which is, what are your specific goals? Because this could be unruly. Like, there's so many different use cases that come out of this stuff, and this can become like overwhelmed with content. You're like, shit, I don't know what's being told. I can't identify a single consumer trend. I don't know what the hell my influencers are. And then you let it go.
If you start from the data perspective and work your way back to a goal, you always end up with an inaccurate response.
Right.
That's exactly right, because you can sit there and I can look at all the data of the questions you're asking right now and assume where I think all you guys are in your own research and buying cycle for social tools. That'd be completely incorrect.
Yeah.
So by knowing that that's what I'm looking for, then we would ask questions to get, you do it differently.
There's a way.
I think the best way to do is start from the goal, right? And
Exactly
then
right.
if you know this is my goal, then you know which tool is good for what, and this is the ideal tool for me.
And by the way, to that,
Matt, there's a question here. Sorry, Matt.
I was interested in hearing, well, I guess when you finish this thread, is for some of you, I know some of you are more on the agency side, right, versus in the client side.
Yeah.
But some of the examples of whether it was a campaign or whether it's something specific, and bring that to life. So whether it's a client, you mentioned Campbell's, right, or whatever that is, to bring that to life, that great social listening.
The next moderator. Yes, why don't you talk about some examples?
Whether it's using these tools or just so it brings all this to life.
I mean, a very basic one that I used, I think 2 weeks ago was, for influencer marketing. If you're able to understand, first of all, what is the identity of your brand? So I mean, that sounds silly, but a lot of people actually don't know. They think they do. You're square, everyone is aligned with that. And then you've got an activation, a sale, a promotion, whatever, in 2 months or 2 weeks in a particular city. And you want to rally the right influencers that are, by the way, not paid influencers, I'm talking about the free people, the people that have a natural affinity. You can do that. Identify who they are. You can actually go to their social media, their profile, and you understand this person's profile and makeup and who he talks to, that's who I want to get to. So I'm going to identify the 15 people on social in that city and say, hey, thanks for being a fan of my company, my product, my service. I got this thing coming up in 2 weeks or 2 months. Can you just be you? Keep doing what you're doing. Here's some free product, and we're trying to get the word out. And Ford, they had a sale like a year ago at this point, late last year, with the Fiesta. And 3 months after this massive sale they had somewhere in the Midwest, they actually identified the top 15 influencers. And this is Ford, so I'm not trying to break it into smaller businesses, but the top 15 fans in that particular city, and they gave them a free car for 3 months. Free car. They're going to get it back after 3 months, but they said, have fun, post your experiences and whatever. That sort of wherewithal and the ability to identify quickly and do it got them the record setting as far as RFIs from YouTube, sales that day, you name it. Again, really extreme example with a big brand, I get, but you can sort of break it down into...
I could do that with a nutritional supplement and send it to them for use for 3 months.
Here, a note of
right?
caution, if you give somebody something for free, they have to disclose that. The rules have actually just gotten stricter on that, so they need to say, hey, they gave me a free car to drive for 3 months.
Or if you
something.
invite them to an event and you pay for their travel, they have to disclose that.
To this point, did you guys hear what his goal was? His goal was sales via influencer. That's one listening program. I may have looked at this scenario, I'm just making this up now. I may have looked at this scenario that my difference would be, I want to know if I'm getting message permeation. So now I'm listening for something completely different. And this is where, when we talk about your goal, you really have to identify your goal, because while you're activating influencers to generate brand discussions, which will generate positive mentions of the brand, and we know it takes 22 touches to make a sale today, right? So we know that that's what's happening. I might be wanting to measure and monitor simply to make sure our messaging is accurate and people are adopting the correct terminology. That is, that they're using our car brand names and they're not using Chevy by mistake. So legitimately, that's when we talk about listening for goal. Everybody's going to have a different goal.
So a good example is a few weeks ago, we did a big announcement around in the Internet of Things, which is a very hot topic. And we brought only 4 influencers to Rome. There was a press and analysts there as well, but we brought 4 of our influencers there. And while we were going through the day, we started noticing on Twitter, that it eventually became SAP IoT was a trending topic in Italy. So how did that happen when we take a look back? And we were working with our influencers. They have tools themselves on their laptops and on their phones, and they're listening and seeing what's getting picked up by their audience, because they have really large following. So the more they're relevant to their audience, the better it is. And so they found, we were doing this big train example, brought in a train, and they were able to see this IoT example come to life. They were finding in Italy, like the word train versus trains with the S was getting picked up a little bit more. And that, using the entire hashtag Internet of Things was getting picked up more versus hashtag IoT. And then, in the US, in certain markets, the hashtag IoT was more popular. So depending on what they wanted to do, they kept, bouncing back between certain words and certain things. And it made, they were, in this short period of time, they made, our hashtag a trending topic in the country. So it's possible by social media listening and using these tools, you can become relevant in the moment.
Business Wire, we're a news release distribution company. What do you think people use on social? Press release. So if I'm listening for news release, I don't hear anything, right? Because that's what we are. So we had to change our messaging. We're still a news release company, but on social we use the phrase press release. But that is word choice, small word choice, massive impact. But so even listening, so when you pick your plan, your policy, what you're listening for, when you're setting a goal, you've got to be really specific and then meet to that goal. And then you start seeing the accuracies in data. Because you can legitimately say, data told me to do this. Data makes decisions.
Unless there's a question, I'm going to move on to our final question for the panelists, and then feel free to chip in. What advice would you give to businesses if they want to be ahead of the game in the next 3 years? And I'd like to start with Serena. She talked about that she thinks it's good to create an internal culture that's ready to hear feedback. And that goes back to the point we didn't get to earlier, that she has a very strong opinion that if you listen and you don't actually do anything about what you find, then you shouldn't be listening.
Yeah, don't say it, right? And there's management that does that. There's management that expects the audience to modify to the company. And we're no longer in that industry anymore. We have to. And sometimes it's just tough luck. Like, you have to be the one to translate these things to your management team because you can't make them change. But knowing what you're listening for and setting those goals out is really big. It's a specific question.
The question was, what advice would you give to businesses if they want to be ahead of the game in the next 3 years?
Yeah, so I think trend spotting is the big part of it, right? You have to know what your entire industry, the future of your industry. So I'm in the newswire business. So what do I follow? What are my trend reports besides the Mary Meeker report? Chet and Sharma's smartphone, his mobility report. Because I need to know how many people in the world have smartphones, which phones they're using, why. That's where news consumption happens. I'm in the new press release distribution company. It shouldn't be that this is my thing, but don't get me wrong. All the PR trend reports that come out are all great. That's telling me what's happening now. But if I want to know where people are moving forward, I have to look at these bigger industry reports. So that's what I do, is I try to ladder on the biggest industry and get an idea of what they're moving. And I set up Google alerts actually, or mentions, mention.com, so news consumption. It's a phrase I started using and publishing about 3 years ago. And now I get Google alerts every day with other people utilizing that same phrase. It was random, but I happened to 3 years ago have identified that was going to be the hot phrase. By the way, you remember how bacon is such a big popular thread? You heard it here. Sobriety is the next big popular thread, like bacon. So you can identify these trends that are going to be massive social trends very early on. So get to know your industry and then set your benchmarks against that industry.
Actually, Facebook just yesterday, I read something, came out with a trends tool, and there's google.com/trends, which is a little bit like Google AdWords, but it is more focused on trends, and you can drill down.
You should never, ever publish a blog post or a news release without using Google
It's a
Trends
really
to write
awesome
headline.
tool that gives you a lot of insights also, around the space. Or even if you use a simple tool like Hashtagify, now write that there, it will tell you if your topic is food, right? All the terms that people actually use as hashtags. So there's a lot of help to hit the right spots. But I know, Cyrus, that your opinion is that I guess how I interpreted it, you can't do it all alone. So to stay ahead, you need to work with partners.
Yes, and I'm going to iterate on that too, because I think over the course of the last 40 minutes, I've sort of evolved, not changed my and it started with what Serena was going to say, which is the culture of your company and how that needs to be evolved with sort of what's happening right now, which is social is only going to get 18 times bigger than it is today. I think everyone sort of knows that. Again, it goes back to the authenticity. It's the medium that is it's getting richer and richer. Millennials that constitute the biggest segment of your sort of audience. That's where they live and work, right, and speak. Now, having said that, once you are completely committed to that notion, then the company has to be ready to understand the goals. And then once you understand the goals and get the data you ask for, then what do? Are you nimble enough to act? And everyone is on board. You invest what you need to invest, time or money, and say, I'm doubling down on this because I'm not going to hedge my bet. This is no longer a guess. Like we sort of know where this is going. And if your company culture is now that, then that nimble sort of ability for you to start saying, this is the feedback I got. I'm not going to wait and flesh out more. I'm going to roll with that. And I'm going to start putting in product decisions, operations decisions, revenue acquisition, which the social impacts all parts of the business. It'll change your business. And the example I want to give, I was just thinking about it, separate from technology, is H&M separates itself from the pack in terms of fashion retailer for the very simple reason that their operations is not predicated on like a season before, what are the fashion trends, and I'm gonna have buyers and do all this stuff. It's within literally within weeks they got whatever the current trend is. They're producing it and they're selling it, and then they're out, they're lapping the market. It's incredible. No one else has figured that out yet. So if you can bring that mindset of being quick, and speed is massive, to an industry and social which is all about speed, well then now you're sort of ahead of the game.
Amisha, do you want to add something in terms of what people need to consider to be ahead in regards to influencers maybe? Or?
Yeah, so you're maybe focus on influencers. So when you're thinking about your company and you want to become part of a conversation with your influencers, you want to also think in the future, how can those influencers, Serena's talking about those future trends, what are they talking about? If you have your community of influencers, you can talk to them, it's human to human, it's not just about technology, like you said, but really find out from them, what are they thinking, what are they hearing from other companies in the market, and they can really inform you, and then they can become part of your community. So you're not just an external part of their community, you can create your own community with your own influencers, and they can be a part of yours. And I think that's a good thing to think about when you're thinking about the relationships you make with these third-party voices and how they can eventually become advocates for you and your brand.
And just, do you want to jump in? So in the news space, obviously I told you earlier, I look at news consumption trends, and hands down, every survey that comes out says what's the highest trusted piece of content a company can create to move people through the sales funnel, familiarity funnel? It's editorial coverage. It's securing editorial coverage or expert content. And when that content is shared, 66% trust in that. When it's shared by a third party, the trust goes to 83%. So one of the terms you're going to see for 2017 is the micro-influencer. So if you aren't creating influencer programs, if you haven't identified, you can literally look at news release. Anybody who uses a wire service for news releases, you get a report of who tweeted your release out. You can literally start identifying micro-influencers without even necessarily creating an influencer program, but that's going to be your focus for 2017, and you really should be listening for the micro-influencer, identifying who they are, and then figuring out what they want to be activated to vote. They're already complimenting you online, right? These are people who are already sharing your information out, but that's going to become a huge point of listening.
When you say micro-influencer, is that just a smaller level of activity that they have?
So like an influencer is, people think of celebrity influencers, but then there's big influencers in your market that, I have an influencer that all CIOs really pay attention to, like Diane Hitchcock, they all really listen to him. But then there are what I call up-and-coming influencers that fit into the micro, so they may only have, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 followers, but those followers are a big part of your buying audience and they're influential to them. And if you think about it, all of them kind of know each other and they start building this network, and if you tap into the network and you can see, hey, this influencer is followed by a lot of the same people, and you can kind of see, and Tracker helps us do this, but you can kind of see what is this network saying, what are they focused on, and what are they doing, and that can really inform you.
Yeah, it's like these 15,000, so what happens is when people get super famous, right, then they get these existing fans that just auto-retweet, and they're people who promote, they're not as engaged. You get these rising influencers, and these people are in it together, right? Everybody connected to them is in it. There's a guy who does API, an evangelist, his name is Ken Lane, and if you're doing API marketing, he's legitimately the only person you have to talk to. You talk to him, he tweets it out, everybody listens. He's probably got I should lie, he probably has 1 million followers, but I think he has 10,000 followers. But most people would never, when you say influencer, his name would have never come up. But yeah, so it's identifying even within your own company. And we've talked about external listening and social listening on the outside. A lot of people don't have social listening for their internal employees. And we're not talking about HR monitoring people's work, but literally employees sharing out information and thanking them and retweeting them and creating influencer programs from existing people. But that's going to be the big thing, because co-opting this audience, so knowing how to listen to what they're saying and what motivates them and their audience is going to be the big part of those programs being successful.
And that's called employee advocacy, which I think is another big thing that's going to be a trend coming out, where you can take what's happening outside, empower your employees, and they become advocates for you as well.
So we could have 5 more panels on each of these topics. I'll have to wrap it up unless there is really a burning question, and the lady here was first.
I don't know if it's that burning, but I was just going to say I agree with the kind of micro-influencers. I think it creates a lot more authenticity for the brand as well, rather than huge influencers that everybody pretty much knows are paid anyway. But also another trend for the next 3 years that I wanted to bring up and hear everyone's thoughts on was video, because social with keywords turned to images, and now the next trend for the next few years is video. And on that note, another tool for the whiteboard is Tubular Labs. They're kind of like social listening for video. So just wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on video and how you kind of leverage that.
So we use a video in our influencer marketing program. So we have videos that we have, our influencers interviewing our customers, and they're a little bit more polished. And then we've done a lot of Facebook Live videos from events, because it allows us to extend the event. And And what I'm finding with these videos and even promoting the videos or webcasts and things like that is you have to make it real, relevant, authentic to your audience, and also very snappable. So it has to be these short, relevant points. It can't just be two talking heads. So you have to think about jazzing it up with some graphics and things, and it's fast moving because people want that kind of snappable, real content.
Last question. We have to wrap it up, I'm sorry. I want you to have a break before the next session. So this gentleman had been waiting, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I think having all the tools is great, but somehow we have to sort of train the workforce. And so what sort of skill sets do you see evolving as more of these tools become available? And how do we train our teams ourselves to make sure that we're taking advantage of all these listening tools?
I'll just jump in really quickly. So one of the things about new people coming into the workforce, the youngest audiences coming into the workforce, right, is these people know process, but they don't know context, right? You frequently hear, well, somebody will give you advice back, like, oh, why did we do it this way? We should have done it this way. It's like, well, you actually don't know, but here's the reason why. Good question, but here's the reason why. So I think context is a really, really valuable learning tool. And that's truthfully understanding where the business sits in the business goal, really understanding the C-suite's goals. It's not really that you're social listening and therefore you want to ask marketing what marketing's goals are. You need to listen to what your C-suite, where your company sits in your industry, its value proposition in the industry. Like, you almost have to know sales, you have to know operations, in my opinion, to do listening. Because what's going to happen is, this is going to change out here. And it's going to impact your entire industry. And if your social listening team isn't aware that these types of threats exist to your entire industry business, they can't understand the data that they're gleaning, right? Because they've got the data, they've got the tactics, they don't have the context. So I would actually, with our listening team, one of the things we do is we actually give them almost the keys to the internal kingdom. Here's Business Wire's goal within our business. Here's where we are within our industry. It's like a SWOT analysis. Here are the threats that we see, and then their job is to not only listen to the things they're supposed to listen to, but they also have to listen to anything that's going to impact those bigger goals. And then they have to come back to us, and when they make an assessment, it's not just these 3 tweets made us say X. These 3 tweets plus the data of the knowledge of the industry is how we're going forward. So I think the hardest thing for especially new listeners to really understand, or when you go into a new company to do listening, is the very first thing you have to do is really get up to speed on the context of your business.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut it off. If you still have questions or follow-up, please meet us personally afterwards, and we're happy to answer any question. I just wanted to say I also had a bit of an evolution here, like Cyrus, that I thought our clear outcome would be data-driven marketing is it, because that's what everybody's saying, but I would say data-driven marketing without really using elbow grease and smart tactics and people is worth nothing. So on that word, thank you so much.